Very crucial day for Hong Kong and certainly a crucial debate for Hong Kong's future. With us in the studios in Hong Kong and Beijing to talk about that, we have in Beijing Mr. Teng Jianchun, Senior Research Fellow with China Institute of International Studies. Welcome, sir. In Hong Kong, we have two guests, the Honorable Priscilla Leung Mei-Fan, who is the Legislative Counselor of Hong Kong. Welcome, ma'am. Meanwhile, in Hong Kong, we have also Dr. Edward Xie, CEO of Gaofeng Advisory Company. Welcome to our program to all of you. We have two representatives coming from Hong Kong. One is more from the business side, the other is more from the political side. Ms. Leung, since you are a Hong Kong legislative counselor, and the debate is taking place among you and your colleague, 70 strong of you altogether. Help us to understand what is the latest development about this debate. Ms. Leung.
The debate involved the future of Hong Kong. We can see there a huge majority of the Hong Kong people would like to see an improvement and the reform to be successful so that everyone, every registered voter in Hong Kong can enjoy the right to vote the chief executive by one person, one vote. Apart from the
I want to ask you some updated information, Ms. Leung.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
47 out of 70, that is supposed to be the number, last time we checked, among the legislators to support this specific proposal. But you need about 2/3 in order to get that passed. Now, the so-called Pandem have about 27 seats. The last time you checked, ma'am, what was the latest situation, if you can, to share with us?
I have attended the debate for the whole day today. I can share that it is quite pessimistic that we can have enough votes for the 2/3 majority for this round from what the people, especially for the opposition side, have expressed their view. Because if we want to get 2/3, apart from the pro-establishment camp, we have 42 votes now. We need 5 more votes from the opposition. And up to now, from the so-called moderate Democrats, many of them already expressed that they would veto the political reform proposal. So it's quite pessimistic.
What is ahead for the next few days before the final vote? At this moment, we understand today's meeting, Wednesday's meeting, has been adjourned, Ms. Leung. So what are some of the legislative steps and debate processes you and other colleagues at the Legislative Council are likely to go through before the final vote? Help us to understand.
I expect it take one more day, and we might have the chance to vote tomorrow. In fact, the differences now is that whether we should really give a chance for Hong Kong to take this political reform so that we can improve Hong Kong's situation. While from the opposition side, they just say, because they don't have the chance, they just don't believe that they might have the chance to have a fair deal under this reform, and then they decide to veto it.
I see. Here is the thing. The whole debate has been about, Mr. Xie, if I could ask your views, about pocketed or pocketed all. So-called pocketed means the current version, a proposal provided by the central government and also the executive branch of the Hong Kong government. The so-called pocket all means one person, one vote, extreme direct election, which of course is not necessarily a practice practiced in many countries and regions around the world. What do you make of these two versions, pocketed and pocketed all?
Pocketed and pocketed off. Can you
Mr.
explain
Xie.
the differences again? Yeah. Can you explain the difference again, please?
My question is, what do you, as a Hong Kong citizen, make of these two possibilities, so-called pocketed or pocketed all? Briefly.
Well, I think, this is a historical moment for Hong Kong, as, the proposed political package will actually give the Hong Kong, all the qualified voters of 5 million Hong Kong people to have a chance to vote for the next chief executive. This is a big move. And I think at least half of the people in Hong Kong, according to the polls, are really supporting this as a way for making a lot of progress in the politics of Hong Kong. There are obviously people who don't believe that this is the way to go forward, because they believe that this is not a quote unquote a true universal suffrage. There is a so-called international standard to the universal suffrage, but at the same time, if we study politics, there's actually not a universal standard on an international basis. So in a way, it's quite contradictory.
Ms. Lang, what do you make of this? Because
Yep.
what Mr. Xie has talked about, one is so-called international standard. That, of course, is very debatable. We all understand inside the UK, the system is not necessarily that. Inside the United States, it's not necessarily that. Of course, China as a whole is a very different political system. But let me ask you this. This is about whether you throw out the baby together with the bathwater. The baby is, to you, what?
A political system in anywhere in the world, in fact, it must be in accordance with their constitution. In Hong Kong, it must be in accordance with one country, two system, as well as the basic law. And in Hong Kong, I truly believe that we have to look at the matter for political reform from the perspective that whether the proposal is good for Hong Kong or bad for Hong Kong. The name, the label they use, true and false, are completely out of the picture, because there's no definition of a political system, and only the country and the region knows what is the best system for themselves. So it's like wearing the shoes. Only Hong Kong and China know what is the best system for Hong Kong. So if the system is in accordance with the law, in accordance with the basic law, as well as it is for the betterment of Hong Kong, then it is a genuine universal suffrage.
Well, Ms. Lang,
because
I know you're very passionate. I know you're very passionate.
Unique history.
Yes, I know you're very passionate about your arguing point, but let me just help you to maybe structure a little bit about what we need to outline to our audience here. First of all, if this specific proposal would not be passed by the Legislative Council, your body, then will there be the so-called real, quote-unquote, universal suffrage, one person, one vote, direct in Hong Kong by the year 2017 for chief executive? What would be the other way, the alternative about?
I personally, politically, I don't see if we veto the political reform proposal this round, we would have time to start another round of discussion for 2017 political reform. So the consequences would be that for chief executive, we would lose the opportunity to adopt this universal suffrage for Hong Kong, and as well, according to the MPCSA decision, the Legislative Council also has to postpone the reform accordingly 5 years later. So from my point of view, it is extremely unwise and quite stupid for the opposition to veto this political reform proposal.
Okay.
Because it has do them nothing good, but only harm.
All right, see, Mr. Teng here in Beijing, you help us to understand another aspect, which is some in the so-called pandemic camp inside Hong Kong asked the question, well, if we do not approve this by the Legislative Council, we can ask for a quote-unquote better and bigger deal in the immediate future. Is that going to happen within the legislative framework that we have been talking about, both in our backgrounder and earlier illustrated by Ms. Lam?
Yeah, that may happen, in the future. But I don't think the local government and the central government will give any opportunity to go in that way, because the law and also the citizens in Hong Kong are all in favor of the political reform step by step. Actually, to my understanding, the big difference between the two camps is, how far, the political reform can go forward.
The degree of it.
Yeah. I think for the sake of the stability and prosperity of Hong Kong, and for the sake of the Hong Kong people, I think the political reform should be very cautious, in this regard.
Ms. Xie, let me read out something that we have found out, some polls going on in Hong Kong right before the debate. A poll conducted at the University of Hong Kong last week, 45% of people in support, 40% so-called oppose, and more than 1,000 Hong Kong residents have been polled in that specific one. Another poll by the Reform Advocates, which is called the Defend Hong Kong campaign, 52% support the plan, while others do not necessarily so. So if the Legislative Council eventual result does not confirm with what seems to believe as the general atmosphere or mood of the Hong Kong residents, what would that mean for the Legislative Council, their authority, and also their way of carrying out their tasks?
Well, I think, the results of the polls have clearly shown that because of this political issue, the Hong Kong society is heavily divided. The numbers are pretty close, actually. And so one can say that, half of Hong Kong supports and half of the Hong Kong does not support. Whichever way, I believe Electoral is going to have a hard time to assert the legitimacy on this issue, because whatever way, there will be half of Hong Kong who would not like kind of the outcome. And what I believe is probably is going to happen, as Ms. Leung has talked about, is that there's a reasonable chance, in my view, that the package will not be approved by the Electoral. And what does it really mean for Hong Kong? I think it's going to mean a lot of stalemate for Hong Kong, and frankly, for a lot of Hong Kong people, that would become a major disappointment.
Yeah. If, as both of you have indicated about the possibility, this bill would not be able to be passed. It's, of course, only a if. There are only two possibilities, if yes and if no. If no, then what does it mean for the Hong Kong society? Because we see in so-called the Occupy Central movement have already divided Hong Kong in such a way. What does further division would mean for your special administrative region, for your economy, for your social stability, for the next generations of the Hong Kong residents? These are big question marks in many's minds. Ms. Leung, as a legislator, I'm sure with the council, you must have some thoughts about the ifs.
Yeah. Hong Kong is really quite divided nowadays. Hopefully, this controversy out of the political differences may settle down a little bit, at least for a while. After this big debate, and at the end, the proposal did not get passed. We hope that the time could be spent more on the livelihood issues, at least give some time for the society to rest a little bit. And I also ask the opposition camp to take this line, because it is not healthy for Hong Kong to continue and only focus on political debate. Whereas if a country or a place need to have a balanced development, we would not, in very short period of time, to agree with each other.
I see.
So we might need to just put down this for a while and focus on the things that we can really come to consensus, like economic development and livelihood issues.
I see, but is that a wishful thinking, Mr. Xie? Because I understand business community are very concerned about this. They want to have the economy growing. They want to have Hong Kong catch up not only to, let's say, Singapore, but also to even some of the mainland cities such as Shenzhen. There were competitive so-called reports coming out, not necessarily in Hong Kong's favor. So under the current circumstances, will Hong Kong be able to pick up its spirit if this bill will not be able to be passed?
Again, it depends on the outcome of this, of the vote by Electoral on the political package. If it get passed, I believe that, the opposition is going to react quite violently, and that obviously will not be good for Hong Kong. If it doesn't get passed, as I mentioned, I think Hong Kong will get into somewhat of a stalemate. This is a big concern for the business community, because in a way, Hong Kong is already moving slower relative to other parts of the region, in particular the Chinese mainland, and as you mentioned, Singapore. In particular with Chinese mainland, entrepreneurship, innovation is moving very, very fast at a speed which is higher than many other parts of the world, including that of Hong Kong. If Hong Kong gets into a stalemate, that means the distance between Hong Kong and the mainland will become even bigger, and therefore, in a way, in between Hong Kong and cities like Shenzhen, even Shanghai, Beijing, the overall competitiveness will probably decline.
Ms. Tang, before we go, I want to throw this final question to you. You're not coming from the Chinese central government, of course, but as an analyst from the mainland, what do you make of this scenario? Will Hong Kong be put back into peace if this vote does not pass? And then what would it mean for the long-term political reform agenda of Hong Kong, which was promised at the very beginning of Hong Kong's return to the motherland? And then what will be the relations between the central government and Hong Kong as a special administrative region, particularly politically when it comes to the mood? I know this is a very loaded question, but these are all very important issues I need to raise out right now.
Yeah, in short, I think I quite agree with Madam Leung just mentioned. This is not a democratic movement in Hong Kong. This is a political struggle among the groups of interests. For example, the opposition parties, just for their own sake. They don't consider the prosperity of Hong Kong. Actually, Hong Kong has suffered a lot in recent 2 years, especially after the Occupy Center protest. Hong Kong as the financial and trade center should return to its old track for the people and for the region. So I think the local people, the local government, and the central government will try their best to restore the movement or momentum of the development in Hong Kong.
Well, that of course is a great wish. We'll see how the political debate plays out in the next few days at the Legislative Council. As Mr. Leung just mentioned, it probably will come a vote tomorrow, but we will see as how things would develop. But for now, I want to thank Ms. Priscilla Leung Mei Fang, particularly because I know you went through a whole day of big debates inside Legislative Council and still come to our studio in Hong Kong. Thank you so much, ma'am. We really appreciate it. I'm sure many of the Hong Kong residents also appreciate your input in the public sphere. Meanwhile, Edward Xie, a business person coming from Hong Kong, for speaking your mind, sir, at this moment as well. And of course, Mr. Teng Jianchun here with us in Beijing. Thank you so much for being with us. All the best.